Welcome to another episode of the DIDAS Health webinar. My name is Peter James, I'm the Working Group Lead. Today we have a special guest. Michal Jarmolkowicz is talking to us about IoT devices for healthcare. Michal, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for having us. Just a short intro about myself and the company. I have long experience working in the identity space and also in the health space, where 10 years ago we pioneered with some other company a solution for shortening diagnosis from months to just minutes. And we believe that as part of the great work we're doing here as DIDAS Health, there's also a very important element to consider, which is also getting the data from the clinical IoT to our personal health records, so it's readily available for doctor access, but also for preventive health. There's more and more digital health elements and devices and solutions which are happening, and we like to make sure as part of the DIDAS Health working group and as part of the manifesto that we're forming together, that this element is also included. It's in line with the DIDAS vision to also make sure that the data from IoT devices is shared in a trusted and privacy-preserving way. So today we'd like to share our vision and start a discussion, get your feedback. What do you think about this? Our experience as a company is we worked with some major clients on the future of health, which includes elements like self-administered clinical IoT devices. Everything is going closer to the edge. We're being given clinical IoT devices at the hospital to constantly measure our health. We're giving them at our homes as well. And it's very, very important that this data doesn't have any walls into getting into personal health records. So with that, I'd like to give the floor to Damian, which was leading our research into this topic, to share our findings, share our thoughts, and then have a discussion with you all.
Just to get straight into this, what we've been doing is some initial research with stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem. So we've been speaking with different parties here in Switzerland, in Europe, the US, and also to different types of stakeholders, so care providers, consultants, device manufacturers, and solution vendors. And we found really two linked challenges in relation to clinical IoT. The first one is around onboarding clinical IoT devices. So when they arrive, for example, at a hospital or at a patient's home, how do you get them up and running and make sure that they are sort of secured, but also that the data can be associated with the patient who's using the device. And that there is no really standardized way of onboarding these devices. There are obviously many different manufacturers in this space. Many of them have sort of somewhat different kind of onboarding or recommended onboarding processes. Many of them have their own kind of portal, which is involved in this process. And the result of all of that is that it tends to be a costly process, particularly with hospital IoT equipment. And there's also, there are vulnerabilities within a number of these devices which are recognized, and the lack of standardized sort of device onboarding contributes further to potential cybersecurity risks. So that's the first problem. The second problem is around the data. So the data typically is uploaded to the manufacturer's cloud. And then what usually happens is that if you want to then get that data to flow into patients' EHR, there's custom work that's needed, custom integration work, and then ongoing support from the vendor typically to get that done. Particularly if you need the raw data, and particularly if the device is sort of outside the hospital environment. So, for example, it's a device that the patient has with them at home. That's typically not a standard part of how the device operates, and you would need some kind of custom solution. And what we've heard through these interviews is that one of the big impacts of that is it makes it harder to manage patients via a digital pathway. And therefore you need to, in order to manage that patient, there's more requirement for interventions for them to, for example, visit the clinic to be checked. Whereas if you really had, real-time access to raw data from their device, you would be able to manage them in a more digital way, which would be, more convenient for them and also less costly for the health service. So our particular point of view is that everything starts with onboarding. This is a picture of us actually from yesterday or the day before yesterday in Amsterdam. We were at Identity Week Europe, and we were talking about onboarding. In fact, we were mainly talking at this conference about onboarding staff. So a slightly different use case, but the commonality is the onboarding. And whether it's a member of staff being onboarded to a new company, or a customer being onboarded to a service provider, or a device being onboarded to a network, there are some, the kind of common element is really that onboarding creates the foundation for then trusted data exchange. And identity is obviously the key piece there. So the identity of the new staff, the identity of the customer, or the identity of the device, that's a foundational piece to ensure that data can flow to the right places and in a trusted way, and that there's a high assurance of where that data's come from. With regards to the clinical IoT piece, our hypothesis right now is that onboarding and data integration can either be partially or fully automated for every device. We think, or our guess right now is that maybe 80% of those devices could use some kind of a common process, and then there'll be a requirement to augment that with some kind of some kind of AI in maybe 20% of use cases or devices. So that's one of the hypotheses that we're looking to test. Our proposed solution is to enable plug-and-play device onboarding and data exchange using open standards. The open standards point is absolutely key because that one of the root causes of these challenges is that that currently everything's done in a quite proprietary way, and obviously there are standards around data formats. So for example, FHIR and Open EHR, as we've been hearing about in the last sessions, but there are also standards around the formats for data exchange. So for example, W3C verifiable credentials, and also for the protocols. So there's OpenID for verifiable credentials. There's also DIDCOM, and we'll talk about DIDCOM a little bit more. But we wanted to see whether it's possible to really standardize this process using standards. Why? Well, firstly, as Michael mentioned in his intro, it's aligned to DIDAS's vision. So, connected devices are specifically called out in the DIDAS vision. But also we think there's really, and this is based on, again, on the feedback we've been hearing from the stakeholders we've been talking to, there are potentially really significant economic and patient benefits, particularly reduced device onboarding and interface management costs on the one hand, and then easier access to patient data, enabling better, more cost-effective care. So in terms of sort of how we envisage this, so the current state and then the future vision, the current state is at a very high level, and we've got more detail about the current state. So we're mapping this in some detail, but too much detail for this session here. Sort of in a nutshell, often you'll have the IoT vendors, their contracts will stipulate that the customer needs to pay for access to the data, or to pay for custom integration to get access to the data. Some legacy systems don't support medical coding language, so there's just a large variety of different kind of considerations and onboarding processes that is making this harder to manage. So we think that the first phase of this would be to focus on plug-and-play device onboarding. So as I mentioned, onboarding, everything starts with onboarding. Onboarding is the foundation for trusted data exchange. So we wanted to try and address that first. And the goals there would be that onboarding these devices becomes standardized, more standardized and simpler. And an immediate benefit is that it will become easier to substitute devices. So once a comparable device from two different manufacturers can be onboarded in the same or a very similar way, that means you've got reduced vendor lock-in. and you know, potentially then that gives you more leverage as a health provider like a hospital over your suppliers. The next phase, so phase 2, would be focusing on standards-based data integration. So getting data to flow into the patient's EHR without the need for custom integration. That's the goal. There's bound to be challenges with this. You know, we still don't have all the insights into how this is going to work, but that is our aspiration. And using open standards, for example, Open EHR and DIDCOM as well, we think is going to be very useful for this. And you know, we imagine that this in order to achieve this, we'd also need to leverage some kind of AI-driven data harmonization, but you know, really trying to do as much as possible using the standards is the goal. And then the vision for the final phase is where we're sort of calling it full device and data roaming. So this is where the data would go into a patient's personal data store. That would either be the data itself or some kind of metadata plus link to the data. And then the data is available wherever the patient goes. So you kind of address this problem that if you're, as a patient, moving between healthcare providers, often it's difficult for the new provider to access your records. So that's the sort of vision for where this could end up. But there's quite a bit to do before getting there. So that's why that's the sort of final phase. The use cases that we're envisaging right now. So we would ideally like to start with one device, just as a proof of concept. It could be, for example, a hospital device like a weighing scale, something nice and simple. Could be a prescription device, so for example, a glucose monitor, or it could be even a consumer device like a Fitbit or some other kind of wearable or you know, health-related device. And in terms of how we envisage this as a project, the first bit would be to then choose which of those use cases is most appropriate. So what's feasible, where is the interest, for example, from the group here, you know, are the people on the call who are working with these particular devices, where's the interest, and also where do we think might be the quick wins and sort of some ideally fairly immediate benefits. So once we've selected the use case, we then develop a reference architecture for a standards-based device onboarding and data integration process. So that would be where we would need to go into more detail in mapping the current state, understanding the systems involved in relation to the device that's been selected, understanding the people, again, doing more interviews to kind of elicit the real detail about how this works currently. And using that to develop the reference architecture. Then step 3 would be to run a proof of concept. So develop and test minimum viable standards-based device onboarding and data integration. And then finally, an impact assessment. So determining the value of openness in enabling standardization and interoperability. And so the ask to the group is really, firstly, as Michael mentioned, we're really keen to hear your reactions and thoughts on this topic. We'd also, you know, like to, as a group, discuss and consider whether to include a sort of plug and play clinical device onboarding and data exchange, or however we formulate the opportunity, but to include that as a use case in the digital health manifesto. It's probably not going to be one for, you know, next year, or maybe not even the following year, but perhaps something for 2028, for example. So it'd be good to have a discussion around that. And then we're also really keen to see if anyone here would be interested to participate in the proof of concept. We would ideally, what we've got in mind is to include a device maker, a care provider, and/or an insurer, and then a partner with open EHR experience. Is sort of our thinking right now, but very open to suggestions and how we could sort of work this in different ways. And then you know, ultimately, and you know, where we're coming from commercially is that if this works, we would like to be able to help organizations actually bring the value of this approach into their organization. So you know, that's not going to be immediately, but you know, if we can prove this out and show that it scales, then that's what we're aiming to do. And just quickly, finally, Michael's mentioned some of this already, but we're working with the Swiss government to evolve their IAM strategy at the moment for their federal staff. We're also developing strategies for patient-centric health data in the MENA region, as Michael alluded to. And then the final piece is that we're leading the development of DIDCOM version 2.3. So DIDCOM is a flexible, easy to implement, open protocol for decentralized communication that empowers users with privacy-focused solutions by default. It's maintained by DIF, the Decentralized Identity Foundation. It's increasingly in production in different use cases. It's very complementary to OpenID for VC because OpenID for VC purely focuses on the credential exchange part, and it typically involves scanning a QR code to trigger a presentation request. But that's not the right sort of process for a more more sort of full-featured exchanges and data exchanges. So we think DIDCOM is really good for this. It enables you to create end-to-end encrypted persistent channels between any two entities. Could be a patient and a device, or a device and a system. And yeah, so that's again part of our hypothesis is that DIDCOM can play a really useful role in this. And again, it's an open standard. It's going to be standardized at IATF. It's currently a version 2.3, and we're also as part of this we are incorporating CBOR encoding so that we can do very efficient communication over DIDCOM for IoT. So I think that's all, Michael, unless you had any final thoughts before we go into the discussion.
Thank you, Damian, for the great presentation. If you can go back to the Ask slide, and I'll do a little summary. So similarly to what we've been discussing over weeks now, making sure that the patient's data, the health records are available and are captured, and they're, as people run from one health institution to another, to make sure that this data is available, to make sure that doctors can make the right decisions. We see, based on our experience in other parts of the world, we see that clinical IoT will be increasingly important. Things are moving to the edge. To have a vision how things might look in 5 years, we envision this will be much more dependent on edge clinical IoT devices, either running in a hospital setup or running at home. And we really would like to make sure that we bring our global experience in this topic to Switzerland, to try to shape and try to make sure at the very minimal level that this is considered, that it's considered that there's no barriers to getting clinical IoT data from glucose monitors, from simple things like scale and much more elaborate equipment into our health records, that this data is portable wherever we go. It's readily available. Currently, this is not the case. Currently, as Damian described, it's some vendor portal. When a patient arrives at the doctor, at the very best, the doctor has to go to some other system to see the data from some clinical IoT devices, and this shouldn't be the case. The data should be really integrated in the personal health records. There's additional element which we also bring experience and want to shape this in the Swiss context is the preventive health. We believe that with future, like in 5 years, there will be much more opportunities to have preventive health IoT devices, clinical IoT devices that monitor our health constantly and bring early insights to doctors. As part of some startup 10 years ago, I developed myself an AI algorithm that was able to shorten autism diagnosis from 6 months to just 5 minutes. There's much more solutions already available today for Parkinson's, for other, to detecting early signs, sometimes years before currently diagnosis is done. And this is the great barrier. Somebody mentioned, I think like two weeks ago in some other forum, that we have those Ferraris for preventive health, but they're riding on dirt roads. And we like to make sure that with this manifesto, we start shaping the opportunity for Switzerland to make sure that the clinical IoT data is readily available, that there's a standard. What Damian mentioned, currently it's very proprietary and and artificially custom integrations which are being made, while the reality is that 80% of clinical IoT onboarding and data is basically the same thing. And we believe there's a great opportunity to standardize it. As part of the DIDAS and DIDAS Health, we believe that the way this direction is with technologies like this, like DITCOM, to have a plug and play. To give a simple example, today you have to have a specialized security team to issue certificates for some IoT devices, generate passwords. It would be so much easier if we had plug and play, if the device came with its own identity, the same way we come as employees or as citizens in future with our EID in a wallet. We believe devices should come with their identity already set up. So at the hospital level, there's no need for some special team. There's no need to maintain like PKI systems, very complex, very expensive. It should come with its own wallet, with its own identity that we can trust, with its kind of digital passport. Use this as the fundament to set up the trust for the data which is being shared, and make sure that this data can easily flow. So there's very clear vision how this works. It's very similar to the IoT identity, and data is very actually similar to like human identity. And we see, as Diamond mentioned, so much similarities comparing onboarding a human, a doctor at the hospital, or onboarding an IoT device. We believe the device should come with its wallet, with the identity at the manufacturer level, to enable a standard-based, much more open access, and in the end, much better care for all of us. So with that, I'd love to hear your thoughts. We are here to share our global experience, try to shape it for Switzerland, and partner with hospitals, device manufacturers, insurers to see how this could be shaped in a Swiss context. At the very least, we would like to have some use case documented in the manifesto, or as part of the manifesto, to aligned with the DIDAS vision, to make sure that this is considered and it's looked that we define standards for Switzerland. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the presentation. So my first impression is very ambitious objectives. You know, we went through similar activities, and well, I could give you a list of challenges, of course, but I'll go into the challenges later on. My first question is, how far are you already working on this proof of concept? Is that already in the works, or is it for the time being just an idea?
Right. So there's some stuff that we cannot share from our customers that we're working with on this future, where it's all about IoT devices, or it's all about preventive and self-administered clinical IoT measurements that there's not even doctor involved. And we already have developed IoT plug and play onboarding in some other context. We're currently shaping the DITCOM next generation of the standard that we believe is the protocol to use that enables the plug and play. We will be presenting at the Geneva conference just in a moment. We're opening the Industry 4.0 session, talking about this plug and play IoT and opening the discussion there. So we're I know and I realize this is very challenging, but I also know, as we've been discussing, things will take years to shape. It might take 5 years before this becomes reality. We just like to make sure that this challenge is flagged. This is the future we believe will exist, that we will be doing a lot of health monitoring ourselves with the devices.
The reason why I'm
us.
asking this is, you know, we are going to have this DICE conference coming up this year, actually in September of this year, and that's why I'm asking how far you are. And for those of you who know me, I'm now on this manifesto, but I'm a big friend of doing things and showing things, and it depends a little bit on your progress, but actually, you remember we started some initiatives. We did some prototypes early on, so I have some Oliver was working on it, but Oliver has other obligations right now. I think this DICE is an opportunity to show something, whatever that is, and because it's in connection with the EID, where we are voting about by end of September. I think with this EID and public beta platform, this will create a pretty high visibility. And if we can show that we have something which builds on top of it, it's not just the blunt EID. Most people only see the EID, but it's really an opportunity to show these verticals based on this trust infrastructure which the EID brings along. So if you're telling me that you will be able to show something on the DICE, I'm just thinking right now.
In September.
On September, early September,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So probably we need to talk separately about it because it goes a little bit beyond of this scope. But that's something what I wanted to do, but it's a matter of capacity. I don't have the capacity. Oliver has other obligations, but I understand you have a very good technical understanding. So if you can demonstrate the proof of concept in conjunction with the upcoming trust infrastructure, then showcasing that for the health sector, we have to plan ahead a little bit, because if we know we can do it, I'm thinking about inviting two types of audiences, probably three. One, we will need the manufacturer of these systems, so the clinical information system, because it has to integrate. And there's one German provider who is basically building a new one, because the legacy systems, as you certainly know, that's one of the challenges. You have to integrate that into a legacy system, and with them it's rather difficult. But if you have either a local one, I'm thinking about Zistec, or a new one, a new player who is open to new modules and marketplace and business models, that would certainly be worth inviting them, but we have to plan ahead a little bit. I would also like to invite representatives from the Federal Office of Public Health, but for them to show up, we have something which is relevant for them. And the manifesto in itself, well, it's not really sexy, I think, for most of the players. But if we can show a practical example, of the one hand, of such a app, or however it's being implemented, and the EID or the trust infrastructure, then we might get some interest from the Federal Office of Public Health, because I think that's what they need to start thinking about, but they're not yet there. So, but if you want to achieve that, we have to start planning it quite quickly. That's the reason why I'm pushy on this one. And then, but you certainly have encountered the challenges. So you're asking for feedback. So first and foremost, I would not put it on the technical side. Your audience will be clinical representatives, and they have no clue what DITCOM is. I mean, probably they have even no clue what open air is. So you have to use their language, and currently your language is pretty geared on the technical side. So that's one thing what you have to think about.
That's really useful. Yeah.
And the second thing is we did some applications very similar to yours. We had them implemented. We had running prototypes. And the second thing is about the business case. You really have to find a business case. That's actually something what I want to develop in parallel to the manifesto. We have to show the value. And the challenge in Switzerland is we have the wrong incentive systems. Unfortunately, not something what we can change quickly. But you have to be aware. We built an application. I have colleagues who built whole ecosystems. They even had a business case, but it doesn't help if there is no appetite to do it, even if there's a business case. So somehow we have to think how we bring it into the system. That will probably be the most challenging part. And actually I have a third group of audience, because I have a pipeline, but I just didn't have time to talk to everybody. Probably we could reach out to investors, because probably you can do the prototype, but at some point of time you will need some funding. And I have one person who claims to be an investor, and this is also an audience which we should invite, but that all needs some planning.
Yeah, thank you, Pete, for this input. We definitely, this is why we're here to show this opportunity. We're bringing our experience. We're willing to invest our time to shape an impactful demo together. But to make it impactful and not show some, circuit boards, we ideally would like to partner with a hospital, partner with a device manufacturer, and really show it in the real context. Like this is today, this is how much money is wasted, how much time is wasted. This is the impact to the patients in the end, and how this could be much easier if, in a very Swiss way, like some of the work we're doing for the Swiss government is making sure there's a standard and all the government entities use the same kind of identity layer when for federal employees, for federal applications. We believe there's an opportunity for Switzerland as a whole and the health system to save a lot of money. 80% of the onboarding integration work right now is artificially made custom, but it could be standard. It could be standardized based on those protocols. We could show how to realize those savings, and in the end include the
Theoretically, you're right. And we went through that process several times. In practice, nobody cares. Look, the electronic health record in Switzerland has wasted more than $1 billion in the meantime, and nobody cares. It's really sad. I think the way you bring it into the system is on a use case by use case basis where you really can demonstrate the added value. And there are successful use cases. So I know about certain companies doing, I avoid the term AI, I rather call it smart report writing, but they are successful because it saves time from the clinicians. Based on my own bad experience, it doesn't help if you impress them with technical details. So they have to understand immediately how it brings value to them right away. That's how we can bring
Thank you
it
for
into
this
the system.
feedback, Pete, and I'm totally echo your opinion. All of our projects, I'm talking here about a lot of the vision, the long goal, because this is something we're trying to shape. But any project would have to focus on immediate business benefit. So one thing you mentioned is exactly this benefit. Today, a doctor has to log into some other system to get the data from this clinical IoT. This is wasted time, and this could be so much easier if this is just readily accessible in the patient record. As well, we hear feedback from hospitals, from big hospital brands, that they're wasting so much time in onboarding right now, and they're really interested to automate this, make this simpler, cheaper, and more standardized. So I believe there are immediate business cases to make people interested. What we need is to find people interested to work with us on shaping this together. So ideally, a device manufacturer in context of some particular hospital, and of course here in Switzerland, to start shaping a POC or some form of demonstration that we could do in September. I think it would be super impactful. This is the future, and we, I think, have the opportunity as DIDAS to enable that.
Have you spoken to Hey Patient? They went through that process. They came pretty much bottom up, not so much from the technical side. I think it started out with their own life. They have some appointment booking. That was one of their first functionality. And I think the problem was that they spent so much time to arrange hospital appointments for the children, something like that. So it started from a very practical use case. I know both of them. It's a couple. They're quite successful now, but they're working on it for quite some years now. So Hey Patient, if you haven't heard about them, have a look into it. Probably we should open the floor for other questions. Are there other questions in this round?
And I would like to hear from you what you think might be an interesting use case that you maybe experience some pain, maybe around glucose monitors, maybe about scales, maybe about some other equipment where it's challenging currently to make sure that the data from some device is available to the doctor. Because ideally, we would have one very, very concrete and impactful use case, and then look for partners to do this demo potentially in September.
Maybe I can comment on this one. I know a colleague who his business model is to do this type of it's actually protocol conversion. It's from the glucose monitors, from the diabetes manufacturers, and these are all proprietary protocols. And basically, what he's doing, he's bringing that to a standard format. But as what I would rather consider to interface with the health platforms of Apple and Google. So I'm using my iPhone. I've quite a ton of devices, and pretty much every device provider today, if they want to succeed on the market with their own apps, they have somehow to exchange the data with an Apple Health Kit in this case. So I can tell you that would take a lot of time to do all these protocol conversions. If it's already done, if you can just read it from the Apple Health or the Google Health platform, that would make your life a whole lot easier. But I think the real challenge is to interface with the legacy hospital systems. So these are all 20, 30-year-old systems. And it's not just, even if you get the go for them, it's hard work, but sometimes they're blocking you off. So the business model is lock-in by design today. Well, it's a little bit sad, but that's more or less how it is. So with all these nice theoretical considerations, you have some very practical political discussions.
True. So this is also what we experience with our projects, integrating with electronic health records and making sure this data flows. They will not change those systems today, and maybe not in 2 years, maybe in 5, they start to consider this decentralized data and getting data from clinical IoT at the edge in some standard way. So what we did in our project is effectively we designed like a gateway based on those DID protocols, DID standards, to enable the plug and play and start talking about a standardized approach. And this way we are already today able to propose a standard-based approach on integrating this with the electronic health patient records today, and maybe with time shaping a standard so this electronic health record systems implemented natively.
So this is standards. That's something what, in my view, that definitely should come from the government. That's basically what eHealth Swiss should have been done. Unfortunately, they haven't done a lot. I think I'm even going to attend one of their events very soon, so I can take it up. I think it's now on the radar of DigiSanté, but very sadly, this hasn't been properly documented. It hasn't been pushed. And the most important thing, that needs to go into request for tender. So that must be a mandatory requirement for any purchasing going forward. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So standards is actually a very slow process. That's how we are.
Yeah. So if we wanted to have one thing done and as a standard in 5 years, the same way the government said that each citizen will have a DID that identifies them and then an EID assigned to this DID, we'd like to have each clinical IoT in Switzerland have a DID the same way.
If you want to be business-wise successful, you have to think about early cash flows, and waiting for the DID, you will run out of cash until then, quite frankly.
Sure. Now I'm talking about the 5-year vision.
You should think about options which are probably not as elegant, but which you can initiate right away. So that's some sort of transitional solution. That's what I would think.
I totally agree with you. And before we have standards, we should have this really non-standardized ways, but bring those discussions to hospitals, to device manufacturers in Switzerland, and show them the immediate benefits if they apply this approach. And then with time, maybe it becomes a standard. So from really immediate benefits that can be realized with this approach, to making sure that the onboarding is not expensive, to make sure that the data is readily available so the doctor doesn't waste time, to the vision in the future to potentially making it standardized. Thank you everybody for joining and listening. I'm really happy we were able to share our vision and some of the global context. It's very relevant to what DIDAS does, what we do here at DIDAS Health. if anybody is interested to learn more or partner with us on shaping this potential POC that we could show together potentially in September, please reach out to me, and we can take it from there.
We officially close this one. Thank you very much for joining for today, and thank you, Michal, for this presentation. So stay tuned for another episode, and if you're interested in this type of content, subscribe to our channel, and then you will be notified about these upcoming events. Thank you and have a good day. That's it.